to the somatosensory or post-central sulcus. So now that I go back to my central sulcus and go one gyri in front, this is my premotor cortex, right? My premotor or my precentral gyrus. And this is where me moving any type of movement that came from here. So we can see that our central sulcus separates what? Sensory and motor, right? Our parietal lobe from our frontal lobe. Occipital lobe. So occipital, we did that. Prefrontal cortex is just the most anterior portion, and this is for like our decision makings. We always hear that, oh, minors, their prefrontal cortex isn't developed enough for them to make really good decisions, and you know, that whole thing. And so that's this prefrontal cortex. Occipital lobe is in the back here for vision. Temporal lobe on the side for hearing. Olfactory bulb. So now we're going to the ventral surface of the brain. So we have our olfactory bulb here and our olfactory tract here. Olfactory bulb here, olfactory tract, olfactory tract. We have our optic nerve. So we have our optic nerve is actually cut off here, but it would extend this way, but we have it on here. So we have optic nerve, optic nerve. Optic nerve would be here, optic chiasm, optic tract. So we have our optic nerves, optic chiasm, optic tract. Optic nerve, optic chiasm, optic tract would be down there. So let's talk about this. So our optic nerve has medial and lateral fibers. The medial fibers of the optic nerves, they both cross in the optic chiasm and extend into the optic tract to go into the brain. So we can say that our right optic tract consists of left optic nerve medial fibers and right optic nerve lateral fibers. That is what makes up our right optic tract. Again, right optic tract is made up of the left medial optic nerve fibers and the right lateral optic nerve fibers, and vice versa for the other one. Okay, pituitary gland is here. You'll only see this attached to the dura because if we remove the dura, as you can see, the pituitary gland goes with it. So this is the pituitary gland here. It's an endocrine structure, and we'll go into more detail about its functions when we do endocrine. But it's actually connected to the brain by a stalk called the infundibulum, and it would be right here. So we can see the hole here where the infundibulum would go. The hole here where the infundibulum would go, where the pituitary gland would be attached. Mammillary body. So we see the hole where the infundibulum would go. We would come out and then go a little bit down, and this is going to be the mammillary bodies. And this is like a relay station for olfaction. So we see it here too. So the hole where the infundibulum would go, come out, come a little down, and this is the mammillary body. Cerebral peduncles. So where the infundibulum would go, come out, mammillary bodies, right? And then go to the side, and these are your cerebral peduncles. Again, mammillary, infundibulum, mammillary body, cerebral peduncle, cerebral peduncle, cerebral peduncle. Then we have our pons here, and this has fiber tracts for sensory and motor tracts. Then we have our medulla. Our medulla oblongata is here, and that's like your vital sign portion of your brain. So like your heart rate, your blood pressure, respiratory rate, all of that is going on in the medulla. Then we have our cerebellum, which is here. Cerebellum, can't mistake that, right? Cerebellum for balance. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this whole brain and we're going to make a sagittal section down the middle and cut it into right and left halves. And then we're going to open that up, right? Cut it down the longitudinal fissure, open that up, and see what's in the middle. Okay, So let's look at that. So first we have our corpus callosum. Our corpus callosum is here. Corpus callosum is here, and this basically just connects the right and left portion of your brain. So you have fiber tracts that cross like this from the left that goes to the right, and from the right that goes to the left. So everybody knows what's going on in the world. Then we have our lateral ventricle, right? What are ventricles? They house the CSF, right? So it's this space in here, the lateral ventricle. Lateral ventricles, right? Then we have our choroid plexus. So what our choroid plexus is, it's a capillary bed that's within the lateral ventricle that produces the CSF. So it's a black string, right? But it's a capillary bed. A black string that comes out of the lateral ventricle, right? And again, to produce CSF. Then we have our fornix. So we took the corpus callosum, right? We rolled it all the way up, and these all have names. Genu means bend, body, splenium is the end. And so once you cross that and you're at the bottom portion, now we're at the fornix, which is here. Fornix is here, and that is dealing with your limbic system or your emotional brain, right? So fornix is here. Again, we rolled the corpus callosum all the way. We cut the corner, and then we came down, and this is the fornix. So you can say the bottom part, or the bottom perimeter of the lateral ventricle. The corpus callosum is the top portion of the lateral ventricle. Septum pellucidum. So your septum pellucidum is just like an iridescent little sheath, right, that separates the two lateral ventricles. So they're connected like this. The two halves of the brains are connected like this. And so you have this lateral ventricle and that lateral ventricle, and you have just like a little sheath, which is the septum pellucidum, that separates the two ventricles. They're not, it's not shown here. You can't see them, but it would just kind of be like a little thin little sheath. Third ventricle. So let's look at the thalamus first. So this is the thalamus here. This is the thalamus here. This is the other thalamus here. This is one that's kind of chewed up. So this one is a pretty good one. The thalamus, right? So you have two thalami, right, on each side of your brain. So these are your two thalami, and they're connected by an intermediate mass. And so the third ventricle would rotate around between the two dumbbells, right, and the intermediate mass, and the third ventricle would rotate around that. So as far as the third ventricle, it would kind of be like this here, right? It's not actually touching anything, it's not actually in anything, but because the two halves are together, the two thalami are connected by the intermediate mass, it would rotate around like that. Okay, and then we just went through the thalamus here. Hypothalamus, so this is our thalamus, so this is our hypothalamus. This is the thalamus, this is our hypothalamus. Pineal body, so our pineal body is back here, and it's this little thing right here. Pineal body here. Pineal body there. Can you see it here? Did you see? Okay, and so that's our pineal body. Then we have our corpora quadrigemina, or our baby buns, and our bicycle seat. So you have your superior colliculus and your inferior colliculus. The superior colliculus is the baby buns. The inferior colliculus is the bicycle seat. We have our superior colliculus here. Then we have our inferior colliculus here. So we have our baby buns, superior colliculus, inferior colliculus, bicycle seat. Cerebral aqueduct. So we just talked about how the third ventricle, right, rotates in between the two thalami, and then so now we need to go to the fourth ventricle, and we do that through the cerebral aqueduct. So we're just, you know, we're just being CSF, and we're just fluid, so we're moving, right? And so, oh, we find this little space here, and boom, we bust through here to go into the fourth ventricle. So here goes our cerebral aqueduct to get to the fourth ventricle. Here. So remember, third ventricle is kind of out here, and then so we're going to find this little pathway to boom, bust through, boom, boom, to go through into the fourth ventricle. Arbor vitae is the tree of life, which is this here in the cerebellum. Arbor vitae. Then we have our meninges. So we have our dura mater, which is here. Dura mater means tough mother. So this is pretty thick and tough. We have our arachnoid matter, we can't see, and then we have our pia mater, which goes with the contours of the brain. So it's like this iridescent stuff that just kind of goes with the hills and the valleys of the brain. So you can't really pin it, but it's a covering, right? That like iridescent covering. So then we have our cranial nerves, right? And we've talked about a few already. We talked about our 1, olfactory bulbs, right, and tracts. We talked about 2, which is our optic nerve. 3, it's here. It's the bunny ears that's on the cerebral peduncle. So cranial nerve 3 is directly on the cerebral peduncle, right? 3 here. 4 is going to be the skinniest. It's going to be about half this size. Half the size of cranial nerve 3, and it's going to be egressing from this portion of the brain here. So cerebral peduncle is here, pons is here, and cranial nerve 4 is going to be egressing about half the size of this one around here. That's cranial nerve 4. Cranial nerve 5 is here, this big old trigeminal. Can't miss these. Can't miss them. This big old thing here, it's all of that. All of this is cranial nerve 5. And cranial nerve 6 is going to be, so we have pons and we have medulla, and cranial nerve 6 is going to be in the intersection between the pons and medulla. It's not here, it's cut off. I'll see if I can find a good one. But it'll be here and here. And that is it. Not so bad, huh?